Hello and welcome to another episode of the Expanse Abridged Podcast series. I sound a lot better than I did last time already, even after only the hello and welcome, so it should be a good episode today. We've got a slightly longer one today. It's chapter 34, which is a Miller chapter of the first book in the series, Leviathan Wakes. And the gang, they've left Ceres, they've kind of recovered from all getting horrific cancer and having no sperm left, or Miller and Holden anyway. And then they found the coordinates of like a random little asteroid where one of the stealth ships that attacked the Canterbury and the Scopuli was, and where Julie escaped from in the Prologue at the very start of the book. And our gang, they've gone off there, they've gone off to go have a look. So we join the boys, we join Miller specifically, as he's getting on his new suit, and he's saying how he hasn't been outside much, like outside an asteroid, and the old star helix, when he's back in Ceres, they'd kind of been really shit, and he's on the Rocinante ones, and they're military and they're sick, so he likes his new suit. He's a happy boy, he's looking dripped. And as he's moving on, they get to this new spaceship, they hop over, they're kind of going through the airlock. Amos is at the front with a reactionless automatic rifle in his hands. There's a really big thunderstorm going on, so I'm going to apologise for any background noise now. But anyway, so they go over, and they're going across their little gantry to board. They're kind of hacking into the system, doing all the typical space stuff, and they realise on the other side, in this spaceship they're in, there's only hard vacuum. There's no atmosphere on the other side. So they kind of go through. Miller lets Naomi go onto this kind of cursed spaceship first. So Miller gestured to Naomi with a nod, ladies first. He's just a gent, you go onto the horror shit show. I know as he's going over, he gets some vertigo, because obviously his perspective from when leaving the Rocinante and everything kind of flips around as he's getting onto this new spaceship. They get on, the ship was dead, the lights coming off their environment suit played over the soft, almost streamlined curves of the bulkheads, the cushion walls, the grey suit lockers. One locker was bent out of shape, like someone or something had forced its way out from within. Under normal circumstances, a hard vacuum would have been assurance enough that nothing was going to jump out of them. Right now, Miller figured it was only even money. So obviously they're going somewhere haunted, and they're worried they're going to get ambushed by zombies or pirates or whatever. And also that locker was where Julie was, so that was 34 chapters ago. Because podcast's getting on now. And they're kind of on board, the ship's off, everything's shut down, and they're going to go to the arse end, which is what Holden says, which is a good phrase, of the ship to go turn on the engines, kind of turn on the reactor. Naomi says, I'll go to ops and kind of have a look around there, but Holden's like, nope, we're all staying together, we're going to hang out. And then Miller notes he couldn't tell from Naomi's body language whether she was annoyed or relieved. As they move down... Bloody hell, the rain's going. As they move down, they go through the galley. It was empty, but the signs of a struggle. A chair, a bent leg, bullet holes in the wall. And on the floor was a dark spill, the colour of amber, flaky and shining with glass in its flashlight beam. Holden hovered closer. Zombie vomit. So, as we saw on Eros, when the zombies get near people, they start throwing up everywhere, and that's kind of, they spread this proto-molecule, and you can see there's already the vomit on this spaceship, which is kind of worrying. The crew quarters hung silent and empty. They went through each of them, but there were no personal markings, no terminals, no pictures, no clues to the names of the men and women who had lived and breathed and presumably died on the ship. So it's kind of like very much like a warship, but not really, like people didn't live there very long, they didn't serve there, which kind of adds to the mysteriousness. There was a massive central compartment as high and wide as the hull of the Rocinante, the darkness dominated by 12 huge cylinders encrusted with narrow catwalks and scaffolds. 12? Just 12? Capital ship busters, Amos said, built to pretty much kill whatever you're aiming at with the first shot, so they're massive torpedo tubes. And it's something like the Donager, which is what they used to kill it with. Although, I guess the Donager they did board as well, but anyway, that's the idea. And they get down to the machine and fabrication shops. There's signs of violence, there's blood on the wall, kind of more of that vomit all over the floor, the glassy gold resin. And as Miller's walking through it, all the habits formed from years of walking through crime scenes put a dozen small things in place. And he's looking at the scratches and where the footprints are. And he says they're in engineering, the crew. And you can tell that by the way all the blood and the footprints is kind of directing that way, apart from one set of smaller footprints that are going the other way. And you can see that person came later. You see how her footprints are over the top of everything else, and there, where she stepped in that blood, was already dry, flaked instead of smearing. It was Julie. So our boy Miller, he loves a crime scene, and he loves his gal. And they kind of keep going south, so not south, but down into the ship, down towards the engine. And they get there, they get to the hatch. It says the hatch stood open. If the darkness beyond it seemed more solid, more ominous, more personal than the rest of the dead ship had, it was only Miller's imagination playing tricks. So they get there, it's dark as fuck, and they can't even turn the lights on. And this is where it gets quite fun. So I'll be reading a few longer extracts, I think, from this. So floating into the engineering deck was like swimming into a cave. Miller saw the other flashlights playing over walls and panels, looking for live controls, or else controls that could come alive. He aimed his own beam into the body of the room, the dark swallowing it. And Amos kind of knows the reactor's been shut down intentionally. He's like, why would they have done that? I don't want to just flip it back on. I'm going to wait and kind of figure out. All around the deck, blue-white lights flared up as he flips on the switch. The sudden brilliance blinded Miller for half a second. His vision returned with a sense of growing confusion. It was a crime scene. They were bodies. Except they weren't really bodies. So they flipped it on, they've turned on the lights, and all the gang, as Naomi gasped, holding yelped, and they go, oh fuck, what have we seen? So the reactor stood before him, quiescent and dead. All around it, a layer of human flesh. He could pick out arms, hands with fingers splayed so wide they hurt to look at. The long snake of a spine curved, ribs fanning out like the legs of some perverse insect. He tried to make what he was seeing make sense. He'd seen men eviscerated before. He knew that the long ropey swirl to the left of the thing were the intestines. He could see where the small bowel widened to become a colon. The familiar shape of a skull looked out at him. But then, among the familiar anatomy of death and dismemberment, there were other things. Nautilus spirals, wide swaths of a soft black filament, a pale expanse of something that might have been skin cut by a dozen gill-like vents. A half-formed limb that looked equally like an insect and a fetus without being either one. The frozen dead flesh surrounded the reactor like the skin of an orange. The crew of the stealth ship, maybe the Scopuli as well. All but Julie. And then Amos goes, yeah, this could take a little bit longer than I was thinking, Cap, to turn on the reactor. Because he basically just walked into like something out of Warhammer. There's flesh everywhere and people have been kind of smeared about like pate. And Amos goes, it's no trouble. As long as none of that freaky shit broke the containment, reactor should be fine. Holden's like, you don't mind being around it. He's like, honest captain, I'm not even thinking about it. Give me 20 minutes. Because our boy Amos, he's tough as shit, and he doesn't care about walking into, like, in this universe, one of the grossest things that has happened so far. And he's like, just don't touch any of it. And Naomi's like, is that what's happening on Eros? And they're like, it must be. And they kind of head up, and they're going to go towards Ops and towards the bridge to turn on the computers. And Miller's kind of watching them, Naomi and Miller walk in front. Holden's trajectory kept him near Naomi and then away from her. Protective and head shy both, Miller thought. Bad combination. As they're kind of walking up, Miller, because he's Miller, starts imagining Julie again. And they walk past that locker that had been kind of torn open from the inside. And then Julie was there with him, pushing her way out the locker. And Miller realises there's no brig on the spaceship, there's no prison. They aren't built to carry prisoners. And he kind of thinks about that, and he's like, they've got all these people they've captured and they're going to infect, but there's no brig, there's no way to do it properly, they're improvising. Ship was carrying an infectious something or other without enough containment to contain it, taking on prisoners without a brig to hold them in. They were making this up as they went along. And Holden chips in and says, they were in a hurry. So they get up a bit further, they get to Ops. Naomi's like, I'll hang out here. Holden kind of stops there and goes, no, right, I better let her do that stuff, because he doesn't want to be weird around his woman. And they keep heading kind of further up the ship, and they get there, they turn the computers on, which Amos managed to power up, and the screens were there, spooling through diagnostics, so standard Miller recognised them. And nothing seemed out of place here, no blood, no broken chairs or torn padding. When it happened, the fight had been down near the reactor. So the bridge is just chill, there's just computers doing their thing, and they're going to hack into the mainframe and have a look around. And that's basically the plan, they're going to see what they can find. And Holden's going to look for briefings, and Miller's going to look for video. The timestamp on the log listed the feed as the day the Scopuli had gone missing. The security camera in the airlock bay showed the crew, belters most of them, being escorted in. Their captors were in armour, their faceplates lowers. So Miller's found the video of them getting the Scopuli crew and taking them onto this stealth ship to have a look at them all. And the crew of Scopuli weren't even wearing environment suits or armour, so they were just kind of geezers hanging out. It was strange, watching her move. With a sense of dislocation, Miller realised that he'd never actually seen her in motion. All the pictures he had in his file back on series had been stills. So obviously it's Julie, because that's the one he cares about. So he's watching her kind of be brought on the ship with the rest of the crew. She looked very small, surrounded by her crew and the men in armour, the little rich girl who turned her back on wealth and status to be with the downtrodden belt. In motion, she looked a little different from the imaginary version he'd built of her. So he kind of realises that this is the first time he's seen her move and do her thing, and we kind of saw it when Miller was losing his mind a bit on the way out of Eros. That he knows he's kind of imagined this, like, Julie, who's not like the real thing, isn't like the real thing, and he's not falling in love with the real Julie, he's falling in love with this imaginary version, which is quite cool, because when you just see her, he's like, this isn't my Julie. You're not the one I've fallen in love with. And the guard said something, and the prisoners, they wanted to strip the prisoners, and the captain started doing it. Miller goes, bad plan, to himself, which Holden was like, what the fuck are you on about? And Julie wasn't moving. One of the guards moved towards her, and they pushed her. She latched onto his arm like her life depended on it. Miller winced when he saw the man's elbow bend the wrong way, but he also smiled. That's my girl, he thought. Give him hell. And she did. For almost 40 seconds, the airlock bay was a battleground. Even some of the cowed Scopuli crew tried to join in. Miller felt it when the gauntleted hand hammered Julie's temple. She wasn't out, but she was groggy. The men with guns stripped her of cold efficiency, and there were no weapons or common devices, handed her a jumpsuit and shoved her in a locker. The others they led down to the ship. So we've seen that from Julie's perspective in the prelude at the start of the book, when she was like fighting, and then she kind of gets hit around the back of the head, and she's taken away from all the others. And the prisoners were taken to the galley, then bound to the tables, and someone kind of speaks to them, and the crew were eyes wide, disbelief, confusion, outrage, and fear. But we don't know what they're saying because it was in, I think, like, the speaker's playing and there's a vacuum, so he can't actually hear what's going on. He hasn't, like, plugged his headphones in. That's my understanding. They do that for, like, the thing that I want to find us in a bit. There are a few hours and a few more, the ship was under thrust, people sitting down, and you kind of start skipping through. 132 hours later, the crew of the Scopuli grew a pair. Miller saw it in their bodies even before the violence started. He'd seen holding cells rise up before, and the prisoners had the same sullen but excited look. The feed showed the stretch of wall where he'd seen the bullet holes. They weren't there yet. They would be. And one of the guards comes in with some food, and the prisoners try and fight, but they don't stand a chance, because obviously they've all been stripped into jumpsuits, and the other guys are in armour with guns and stuff. And then they space a sandy-haired man to the airlock, which we do know who his name was. I can't remember what it was. It's in the prelude. I haven't checked it, but that's like a guy we knew. He had like one little anecdote Julie said about him, and they throw him out, and then you realise that's when like they've lost all will, and he keeps skipping forward. The moment when whatever it was, got loose, but either it had happened in some unmonitored crew quarters, or it had been there from the beginning. Almost exactly 160 hours after Julie had gone to the locker, a man in a white jumper, eyes glassy and stance unsure, lurched out of the crew quarters and vomited at one of the guards. And that's kind of where he's followed the scream, and that's when like the infection would start going kind of rampant throughout the ship. And as he's watching that video, Amos shouts, "Fuck! These fuckers stripped off a bunch of reactor shielding. We've got her up." So he's turned the reactor on, but he sucked down a few more rads than I've picked. I'll just like get the fuck out of there, because obviously he's lost all his sperm and he's radiated as fuck, so he's trying to sort it out. And Amos is like, "No, I'm fine. If I get itchy, I'll head home, but I think it's fine." They kind of go through, and Holden's seen the video. He's like, so Miller's saying to Holden, "I've just seen the video, but it's kind of what you expected, like horrible stuff happening, these people being infected and zombies and whatnot." And then Holden is like, "I had a look through who's been accessing files." So basically he went to the recent tab of the file explorer, and he's like, "There's a load of files that have been accessed 2 days before the incident and then a few afterwards, when the ship got vented, etc." So he's like, "Okay, cool. So some of them are like them before they got fucked, and those ones 2 days after must be Julie." But he finds one of the videos Julie also looked at, and it kind of blares on, and they get the headphones in, and they sit down to watch it. And it's a video that is 2 years old, but this copy was put onto this spaceship like 8 months ago, which is kind of important. It's a corporate logo protogen with a slogan Miller hadn't seen before: "First, fastest, furthest." And they load this video, the logo plays, it goes away, and then a pleasant-faced man sitting at a desk took its place. He had dark hair with just a scattering of grey at the temples, and lips that seemed used to smiling. He nodded at the camera. The smile didn't reach his eyes, which were empty as a shark's. Sociopath, Miller thought. Which I do love that. We've seen it a few times in kind of, I think, this book, and you see it, it's like a common trope, but a smile that doesn't reach the eyes being sociopath, but it is such a good description. Because when you do meet someone like that in real life, you see them and you're like, Christ alive. I can't imagine this person being real. And then this guy starts speaking. He goes, "Mr. Dresden, I would like to thank you and your members of your board for taking the time to review this information. Your support, both financial and otherwise, has been absolutely essential to the incredible discoveries we've seen on this project. Gentlemen, I will be frank. The Phoebe protomolecule has exceeded all our expectations. I believe it represents a genuinely game-changing technological breakthrough. I know that these kind of core presentations are prone to hyperbole. Please understand that I have thought about them and carefully chosen my words. Protogen can become the most important and powerful entity in the history of the human race, but it will require initiative, ambition, and bold action." So it's kind of like a sales pitch, and obviously in that context he's talking about killing people, which Miller notes. And the kind of graphics play, and it's a map of the universe panning from the inner planets where this board meeting must be going on, out towards the gas giants. And the sociopath continues. For those of you on the board unfamiliar with the project, 8 years ago, the first manned landing was made on Phoebe, and that's one of the moons of Saturn. A small ice moon, the assumption was that Phoebe would eventually be mined for water, much like the rings themselves. The Martian government commissioned a scientific survey, more out of a sense of bureaucratic completeness than any kind of expectation of economic gain. Core samples were taken, and when silicate anomalies raised flags, Protogen was approached as a co-sponsor of a long-term research facility. And then in the presentation, the moon itself, Phoebe, filled the frame, turning slowly to show all slides like a prostitute at a cheap brothel, which is quite a fun description. Because obviously it's the Expanse, there's always a brothels, and we've got to have them even when they're in the middle of the asteroid belt, or just dicking about, there's got to be a brothel. Given Phoebe's extra elliptical orbit, so that's the idea, it goes into the universe and out, like rather than just constantly going around the sun, it's like a big oval. One theory has been that it was a body that originated in the Kuiper belt, which I think is like an asteroid belt even further out past Pluto, and had been captured by Saturn when it happened to pass through the solar system. The existence of complex silicon structures within the interior ice, along with the suggestion of impact-resistant structures within the architecture of the body, have forced us to re-evaluate this. So the moon isn't like a normal moon. Using analysis proprietary to Protogen and not yet shared with the Martian team, we have determined beyond any credible doubt that what you are seeing now is not a naturally formed planetesimal, but a weapon, specifically a weapon designed to carry its payload through the depths of interplanetary space and deliver it safely onto Earth 2 1/3 billion years ago, when life itself was in its earlier stages. And the payload, gentlemen, is this. And obviously that is the protomolecule. So the protomolecule first caught our interest for its ability to maintain its primary structure in a wide variety of conditions through secondary and tertiary changes. It also showed an affinity for carbon and silicate structures, i.e. this thing is tough as shit and it likes sticking to people and things that are alive. And it kind of goes on, it's like the initial implication of this is that a larger biosphere exists, of which our solar system is only a part, and the protomolecule is from that, i.e. there's shit going on outside the universe and the protomolecule is from like those guys. And if it had hit Earth instead of being caught by Saturn, then life on Earth would be hijacked, we wouldn't be here, and the protomolecule would kind of reign supreme. The sociopath reappeared. For the first time, smile lines appeared around his eyes like a parody of themselves. Miller felt a visceral hatred growing in his gut and knew himself well enough to recognise it for what it was. Fear. Which I think is a fantastic line. I once went to a networking event ages ago, and it was with a bunch of barristers, and I met a load of sociopaths there who their eyes just are like grey bits of flint, and they just stare at you, and they smile with their mouths. I don't think it even reached their cheeks. And I remember sat there, and I was chatting to people, making jokes, doing the normal stuff, and I started hating them. And I think I had the exact same reaction Miller did, where I realised it was a hate born out of fear of them, because I was like, these things aren't human. It's like I've walked into a room, and it's like the uncanny valley of people, and I have felt like I don't know, something in my body was like, you must kill them, they aren't human. Ugh, people in the city, I love it. Anyway, so basically it's like, this thing's an alien, and it's from outside, it's trying to try and take over Earth and turn us all into protomolecule, but luckily Saturn, our boy, saved it. And he's like, I urge immediate and decisive action to take exclusive control of the protomolecule and move forward with large-scale testing. And the logo comes back on. And Miller goes, okay, alright, fuck me. Holden's, they had no idea what it does, but they slapped their label on it like they made it. They found an alien weapon, and all they could think to do was brand it. And Miller goes, it's been 2 years, they've been doing tests, I don't know what the hell they've been doing, but Eros is what they decided on, and everyone knows what it did on Eros. And all they've been doing is seeing what their toy does when you take it out for a spin. Holden goes, so you take a company that seems to be lacking an institutional conscience, that has enough government research contracts to be almost a privately run branch of the military. How far will they go for the Holy Grail? First, fastest, further, Miller replied. And Naomi chimes in and goes, guys, I found something, you should come have a look. And the chapter ends. So yeah, a longer episode that. Definitely we're nearly at 20 minutes, twice as long as normal. But I think it's really interesting. So you've learned the protomolecule is from, they believe it's from another planet. Some aliens sent it to conquer Earth. It's in terms of kind of the plot driving and becoming grander in scale. It's a really, really good chapter that. It's interesting seeing kind of their interpretation. You kind of realise, oh god, all this stuff's going on. You realise protomolecule have been going for 2 years to plan Eros. And you also just get like some good kind of lore and universe building, which is, I think, really interesting. And I did want to read some of those sections a bit longer because it's kind of important for understanding a lot of things in the future and like subsequent books where things happen in the proto-molecule and the proto-gen, and you realise like what grand force is going on. Kind of, it's one of those great things where humanity is like this little thing, and we kind of follow us and going on. And you realise there are these grand motives in the background of aliens, and like 2 billion years ago they tried to conquer Earth with this molecule, and it didn't happen, and they haven't come back since. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did, and I hope you have a lovely week.